The non-COVID excess deaths, which there have been in quite large numbers since April, I know are not a secret. I will be putting my own slant on this, otherwise it will be a complete waste of time because I'd just be repeating what people already know. I've been tallying the COVID deaths and the excess deaths from the weekly ONS reports since this thing started in March 2020. Ignore the three messy right-hand columns there. Those are the deaths over, or under for that matter, the 5-year average. Mentioning, that is those deaths where there is a mention of the virus on the death certificate on account of a positive PCR test. And cause of death, that is those which of the previous lot were determined to have died because of the virus, according to the doctor who verified the cause of death. It has to be said, just to break off briefly here, there has been much confusion about these two concepts, and I believe that a certain amount of it isn't so much confusion as malicious spreading of misinformation to promote a certain agenda. These two things are not the same. The people who are judged to have had the virus as per a PCR test, whether it's an entirely inconsequential, infinitesimally small bit of virus or a consequential large amount of virus, are not those people who are judged to have died of the virus. They're two separate things, as you can see from those numbers there. The PCR test does not determine the cause of death. The attending doctor, as is always the case in all deaths, determines the cause of death. Those cause of death numbers don't appear to have been listed, at least by the ONS, until October 2020. So as far as I'm aware, for the first few months of this thing, we only had those mention numbers. These are the current totals: deaths involving this cause, any mention, which is that lot there, and deaths due to this cause, which is that lot. And the total for the mentions is 178,000, and for the cause 152,000. That is just about up to date for England and Wales. Overall, about 80% of the mentions are also the causes. It was much higher back in the day when the virus was more virulent. It was around 88%, 7 people out of 8 in the early part, and now it's gone all the way down to about 60% of those people who have the virus mentioned who are judged to have died of the virus. It's much lower now. The fact that it may be the case that only those PCR positive mentions was the data we saw for the initial period listed by the ONS, that might be what caused this PCR misinformation tsunami. But the PCR tests never determined the cause of death. It was the attending doctor, and this is something which I myself misunderstood initially, and I made videos about it. Most of my early videos are now in private, because I put everything in private to avoid losing the channel when I was sitting on a couple of channel strikes. But I said this initially. I'm on the record as misunderstanding it, and I'm perfectly capable of correcting my mistakes. This does not make me controlled opposition paid for by Pfizer. It just makes me a person sufficiently, hopefully, intelligent as to be able to own their mistakes when more information comes out. Do not please imagine for a second that I am naive enough to think that, the David Icke It's All a Hoax crowd who have staked out their tribal positions of it's all a hoax are about to be convinced otherwise. I'm well aware that such positions are well and firmly entrenched now, and they will not be changed on the part of an awful lot of people. And I am not seeking to change those minds or shift people from a position they will never move away from. I'm hopefully, and I'm not trying to talk to those people, I'm hopefully talking to the thoughtful people who are watching this video who are interested in genuine information. So anyway, carrying on. The total excess since April is a bit over 20,000. Total mentions 15,000, but they don't matter for the purposes here, and total deaths caused by the virus just under 8,000. And if we adjust for the bigger population of the whole UK, that gives these totals a slightly bigger, and if you take the COVID deaths away from the total excess, you get 13,153. 13,000 plus deaths not explained by COVID, not actually explained in any way at all, and which I suspect are largely explained by the catastrophic damage caused by quarantining healthy people who never needed to be quarantined. and also the side effects of the virus and the side effects of the vaccine, which are kind of two sides of the same coin. I think it's interesting to look at where we were after the same amount of virus deaths, after 13,000 plus virus deaths. By the 11th of April 2020, we had hit that total at 13,200. And in terms of the peaks and troughs, when we got to that many virus deaths, we were actually just past the first peak and catapulting down the other side. If you add up all the virus deaths that there had been by the time we had reached the first peak and started going down the other side, you get the same amount as the current unexplained excess deaths, and barely a word in the media. Have you seen anything like this on the BBC recently?
For now, the only way to protect yourself and your family from this disease is to stay at home.
Or what about this?
This advice is not a request. It is an instruction. Stay at home, protect lives, and then you will be doing your part.
What a man. Have you seen the former Prime Minister threatening to bring in the army recently?
As for that minority who may continue to flout the rules, we will enforce those rules with tougher penalties and fines of up to £10,000. We will put more police out on the streets and use the army to backfill if necessary.
Yes, we will shoot you if we have to. Have you seen exhortations such as this recently? Act like you've got it. Although, in fairness, how do you act like you've been killed by lunatic government interventions instigated on the advice of known communists? Government advisor and Boris Johnson confidant Susan Michie giving a speech at the UK Communist Party a few years ago. In response to this tidal wave of mystery deaths, has the NHS sought to tempt children into getting vaccinated against whatever it is by comparing them to superheroes like Batman and Batgirl? I believe not. Have James Corden or Ariana Grande, or for that matter and Ariana Grande, been called upon to perform a musical number to promote a relevant medical procedure, the culmination of which is a dance move which was specifically choreographed to highlight the injection area of said medical procedure on the arm? I believe not. And if there is a better example of grotesque propaganda and subtle, not so subtle persuasion than this, I would like to know what it is. And yet it is the case that deaths from this mystery condition do now equal deaths from the virus when we were past the first peak in April 2020, and these deaths are increasing, they are carrying on. It's almost like these deaths don't matter to the government and their media mouthpieces because there's no ideological capital to be made from them.